Today is Thursday, April 21st. We're talking about another twist in the debate over mask mandates, and another threat from Russia's leader meant to rattle the rest of the world even beyond Ukraine. Plus, a new record to report in the hot housing market, why some of the top tennis players in the world are not allowed at Wimbledon. And more Americans are homeschooling their kids, what's behind the trend and the potential impact. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. It seems the debate over masks on public transportation is going back to court. The U.S. Justice Department decided it will appeal this week's ruling after all. Remember, a judge voided the mask mandate for planes, trains, buses, and more. Now the federal government is pushing back since the CDC says masks are still important in crowded indoor spaces. But this fight is not just about the mask mandate alone. The White House says the appeal is also important to keep the CDC's powers in place so it will be able to issue future mandates if needed. Of course, it's not clear yet if the Biden administration will win this appeal and if the mask mandate for public transportation will or won't go back into effect. But either way, the New York Times reports this fight could end up all the way at the U.S. Supreme Court. In the meantime, the mask mandate is still not being enforced by the TSA, most airlines, Amtrak, Uber, Lyft, and more. To be continued. Russia took another step this week to intimidate not just Ukraine, but the rest of the world. For the first time, the Russian military tested an intercontinental ballistic missile. The Russian government says it could hit targets anywhere in the world and avoid anti-missile defense systems. And Russian President Putin said that should make anyone threatening his country think twice. But this is likely just the first test of many, so analysts say it's not likely the missile would be used for an attack anytime in the near future. In the meantime, Russia is moving forward with this war, especially in eastern Ukraine. And more Russian soldiers and equipment are still rolling in. So the U.S. and other allies are scrambling to send Ukraine more advanced weapons to hold off the Russians in the east. Expect to hear more on that in the next few days. The U.S. is issuing even more sanctions meant to punish Russia for the war in Ukraine. And this time, the U.S. targeted one of the largest cryptocurrency miners in the world. This is actually the first time the U.S. has gone after a crypto miner. But officials say it's important because cryptocurrency can help Russia offset the impact of other economic sanctions. And the crypto mining company is not the only one who got sanctioned yesterday. The U.S. also punished a key commercial bank and hundreds of Russians who are accused of human rights abuses, undermining democracy, or helping Russia in other ways. Of course, these are just the latest sanctions of many. And some officials say because of the sanctions, Russia has been facing a serious economic downturn. All the while, Russia is becoming more isolated on the world stage. The G20, that represents the world's 20 largest economies, got together to talk about the global economy. And as Russia's representatives started to speak, officials from the US, Canada, Britain, and elsewhere walked out in protest. But the G20 is not just Russia and Western worlds. It also includes countries like China, India, and Indonesia that so far have not sanctioned Russia over the war, and officials from those countries did not walk out. Typically, these kinds of meetings are meant to talk about cooperation on global development, taxes, agriculture, and more. But this year, it's mostly been about how the world should respond to the war in Ukraine. Wildfires in the southwestern U.S. have been ripping through neighborhoods and forcing thousands of people to evacuate. One is burning near the college and tourist town of Flagstaff, Arizona. It tripled in size yesterday to more than 30 square miles, larger than the area of Manhattan. That's in part because of relentless winds, but also because of extremely dry conditions. And the same kind of weather is expected in the area today. In New Mexico, another wildfire has burned more than 14 square miles just this week. And wildfires in Colorado are growing too, forcing even more people to flee. Between the three states, several homes have been burned to the ground and many more are threatened. This is just the start to what's so far been a very active wildfire season. The number of acres burned in the U.S. so far this year is about 30% above the 10-year average. Another new vaccine is on track to be ready by next year. And this one is said to protect people from both COVID-19 and the seasonal flu at the same time. The vaccine maker Novavax released some early results from recent clinical trials. They show the combo vaccine did boost people's immunity, and the response was comparable to what COVID-19 and flu shots offer on their own. And they seem to be well tolerated. Novavax says serious side effects were rare. Still, this vaccine has a long way to go. Novavax is still planning more larger trials. And then, if all goes well, regulators will have to review the science and decide whether to actually make it available. If you haven't heard of Novavax until now, it's because the company's regular COVID-19 vaccine has not been authorized in the U.S. yet, although it has been in more than 30 other countries, and the American FDA is still reviewing the application. All right, we have more news coming up for you, but first, let's take a quick break to thank our sponsor. I'm always thrilled to talk about Tommy John because my absolute favorite pair of lounge pants are my Tommy John lounge joggers. I first bought them thanks to a close friend's recommendation while I was still pregnant because I knew I wanted something super cozy after having the baby, so I was on the hunt for the most comfortable lounge pants that exist that still made me feel stylish and cute. And Tommy John's lounge joggers have lived up to the hype. I now have 2 pairs. The material is super soft, it feels so good on, and it's also lightweight and easy to move around in. And by the way, Tommy John has great options for both women and men. And get this, it's Tommy John's anniversary month, so whether you're trying them for the very first time or if you're a longtime fan, you can get 25% off site-wide right now at TommyJohn.com/newsworthy. Go to TommyJohn.com/newsworthy today for 25% off. TommyJohn.com/newsworthy and see site for details. U.S. home prices hit a new record high. The median existing house price in March jumped 15% from a year earlier to an all-time high of $375,300. That's according to the National Association of Realtors. And it comes as mortgage rates rise quickly, too. The combination means home ownership may be out of reach for millions more Americans. In the past, sharp rises in mortgage rates have slowed home price growth. But now some analysts say home prices will keep climbing because there just aren't that many homes for sale. Still, there have been some signs the hot housing market is starting to cool. The LA Times says many real estate agents are reporting fewer people at open houses and fewer offers per home, that people can simply afford less at this point. But at least for now, the data doesn't show it's translating to lower home prices. The film production company behind the movie Rust just got hit with the maximum fine for safety violations. Remember, the set of Rust was where cinematographer Helena Hutchins was shot and killed. Actor and producer Alec Baldwin had fired the gun during a rehearsal last year. Well, now government investigators in New Mexico found the movie's managers demonstrated plain indifference to employee safety, that they knew proper procedures and film industry standards for firearm safety were not being followed, and yet they failed to do anything about it. So Rust Movie Productions is facing a fine of nearly $137,000. That's the max allowed by New Mexico law. A spokesperson for the production company said they disagree with this report and plan to appeal. Meanwhile, the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office is still doing its own criminal investigation into how a live bullet got onto the set and into a weapon. What's widely considered the most prestigious tennis tournament in the world will go on this year without some top players. Wimbledon decided to ban athletes from Russia and Belarus because of the war in Ukraine. That makes Wimbledon the first Grand Slam tennis tournament to ban individual athletes from playing, and it takes some frontrunners out of the competition. Daniil Medvedev, who is the reigning U.S. Open champion, is one of the Russians who's now out, along with 3 others who are all ranked in the top 30 on the ATP Tour. On the women's side, the decision eliminates Aryna Sabalenka of Belarus, who is now ranked 4th in the world, along with 6 other top-ranked women. This is the first time Wimbledon has banned athletes from specific countries since just after World War II, when German and Japanese players couldn't compete. Wimbledon said it's necessary now because it wants to limit Russia's global influence. But there's been some backlash, even from the Association of Tennis Professionals, who called the decision unfair and discriminatory. For now, though, the decision stands. Wimbledon is scheduled to begin in late June with players from other countries around the world. Britain's longest reigning monarch is celebrating today. Queen Elizabeth, who has been on the throne since she was 25, is turning 96 years old. But she's keeping it pretty low-key. The Queen traveled to her Sandringham estate out in the country, which happened to be a favorite of her late husband, Prince Philip. Then there will be a big public celebration of her birthday this June that will also celebrate her 70 years as Queen. The Platinum Jubilee will include a royal family gathering on the Buckingham Palace balcony as they watch a traditional parade. There will also be a huge concert and party at the palace, a pageant meant to tell the story of the Queen's reign, and a lot more. Hollywood is going old school this week with Turner Classic Movies. The TCM Festival is back in person this year, and it'll feature quite a few classics and big stars. Director Steven Spielberg will be on hand to celebrate the 40th anniversary of E.T. the Extraterrestrial, along with the movie stars like Henry Thomas and Drew Barrymore. It's also the 40th anniversary of the movie Diner. So stars like Kevin Bacon, Steve Guttenberg, and Paul Reiser will reunite for that one. Cast members of A League of Their Own and Cooley High will also be on hand to talk about their movies. And Lily Tomlin will cement her Hollywood legacy with a hand and footprint ceremony outside the TCL Chinese Theater. The TCM Classic Film Festival kicks off today and runs through Sunday. That's it for the main news today, so now it's time for Thing to Know Thursday. But first, this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. People don't always realize that physical symptoms like headaches, teeth grinding, and even digestive issues can be indicators of stress. For me, the source of stress is a combination of things usually, when both my personal and professional lives have a lot going on at once. And that can have a big impact on my mood and how I show up for those closest to me. So it's really important that I deal with it in a healthy way before I start taking it out on others. And therapy is one way I highly recommend because it can help you not only in the moment, but also in the long term. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy. So give it a try and see if online therapy can help lower your stress. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and the Newsworthy listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/newsworthy. That's BetterHelp, betterhelp.com/newsworthy. Now back to Thing to Know Thursday. Today, we're talking about something that used to be rare, but is now becoming more mainstream: homeschooling. More families than ever before decided to start teaching kids from home during the pandemic. And now, 2 years later, even after schools have reopened, many parents are sticking with it. As the AP reports, homeschooling numbers did dip a little from last year's all-time high, but they are still way above the levels from before COVID-19 swept the globe. Families have a lot of reasons for choosing homeschooling, even now. Surveys say some of the top ones include disagreement with school policies, health concerns, and just wanting to keep what has worked for their children recently. But since there's such a difference in the numbers, those choices could end up impacting the American education system as a whole. Homeschooling has cut into public school enrollment in ways that could affect future funding. And it's also renewed debates about how closely homeschooling should or should not be regulated. Right now, there are no federal rules, so things vary state by state. For example, Connecticut and Nevada require little to no information from homeschooling parents. But New York, Massachusetts, and some others make parents submit lesson plans and comply with certain assessments. Now, state lawmakers around the country have been considering measures to either loosen the regulations for families or add new ones. All right, thank you so much for listening today and for sharing the show. We'll be back with much more news to know tomorrow. Until then, have a great day.